them in a successful manner. So let's see the function model in detail, and let's try to understand what all things are involved in this and how we can design this. Okay, so let's see what is function modeling. So today we'll be discussing about function modeling. Now, in function modeling, as we know, each model, every model, whatever we are studying in this subject, are pictorial representation of the processes going on in the project on which we are working on. So, function model is also a, okay, it is a structured representation of functions. That is, what all things would come in this? Activities, action, process, and operations. Okay, so on the screen you can see that what exactly function modeling is. So it can be defined as the structural representation of functions. Now functions, that is the activities involved, okay, the actions required or the actions performed. It would be dealing with various processes. It would be showing you depicting various processes on the screen and various operations. Okay, so whichever system we are working on, the system we are working on, the system. अरे यार बोल रहा है यार and it would be also defining you about the various operations. Now, it is similar to the activity model. We have already studied about activity model, so I'll be explaining that model in detail also in the further coming classes. So we can say that it is similar to activity model. Where the graphical representation is being done, where its functions within a defined scope are represented. Okay, now what is the history? Why functional model was proposed, or why functional model came into existence? What was the reason? So let's see about the history of sir. थोड़ा सा धीमे है. So let's see what is the history. Okay, what is the history about of the function mod? Now let's see what is the history of function model. Okay, so I'll tell you about the history. Now, in history, let's see why this function modeling was made, or what was the reason? So it is mainly used in the field of system engineering. Okay, it is mainly used in the field of system engineering or software engineering, and it came into existing in 1950, 1950s and 1960s, and but it was effectively used in the 19th century, late 19th century. So we can say that it was used in the field of system engineering and software engineering. In 1950s and 60s and 1960, but successfully this was effectively used in the 19th century, used in late 19th century. Now, the first function model was introduced as a flowchart by Frank Gilbert. Okay, so function model was previously known as a flowchart also. Then, when the modifications were done, when new things were introduced, so it was called as function model. So in 1921, function model was introduced as flowchart by Frank Gilbreth. Okay. Now there are different names used for function models. Okay, so function model is also known as functional flow block diagram also. Okay, and it is also referred as functional flow diagram, functional block diagram, or functional flow. So a well defined function model, okay, which was famous as functional flow diagram, was developed by defense defense related work in 1950s. So first well defined function model hmm, was functional flow diagram, functional flow block diagram. Functional flow block diagram developed for defense purpose. Okay, work in 1950. Okay, so the advanced form or the upgraded form of function model, or we can say one of the type of function model, was functional flow diagram. Okay, so this was the history of function diagram. Okay, not diagram, sorry, function modeling. Now let's see why. What is the purpose of introducing functional model in our life, and how it would satisfy our needs, and what all things can be made from this. Okay, so the purpose of function model was purpose of function model or modeling. It describes functions and processes in detail. Okay, how different functions, how it's functioning, what all the process going on. It would be describing them in detail. Now, it would provide us the information required to make any project or software or model, anything. Okay, and it would help us to understand or establish a basis for determining product and service cost. Okay, so it would help us to identify how the product would be made, how it could be implemented, what all information would be required, what would be the various functions, what would be the various processes. Okay, it would give us or uh, all the details, okay, all the information required, which is necessary to make a model successfully, and how much investment would be required. Okay, that all things be provided, can be estimated or can be depicted with the help of this function model. Now, there are two aims of this function modeling. What are those aims? Okay, so the aims of aim of function models must describe mechanism capable of completely defining first and last throughput states, and it must offer it must offer or some means by which any input must describe the mechanism to generate output. The main aim of designing this function model was it was to describe how the model would work when it is completed. Okay, so it would give us a structural view, a structural layout of the whole system, how it would be working, how the input would be taken, how the input would be processed, and how the output would be generated. Okay, so it would give us the structural view, the mechanism involved in that particular model. Now, the second aim that it must offer some means by which any input must describe the mechanism to generate output. Now, it would also explain us, it would show if an input is being given. For that particular input, if an output is generated, so what was the method behind, or what was the mechanism involved behind uh, that means the processes, the operation involved in to generate that particular output. Now we'll draw a few functional flow diagrams, so it would become easy for you how the input is taken, then how it is being processed, if the process is going on, what all processes or what all functions or what all systems are being involved in that particular thing. That would become clear for you. Now there are various symbols which are used in this. Okay, so the symbols which we use are very simple. Sorry, we have already seen many times about those symbols in the previous classes also. So symbols used would be, will use an line with arrowhead to show the data flow. A rectangle would be used. A rectangle box would be used to define or show the entity. Okay, and for storing data, there would be an one-sided open rectangle with like this type of box, which would show the store. Okay, so when we use these symbols in a network altogether, so that is called as DFD, data flow diagram. And data flow consists of control model, function model, process model, and organizer. So when we use these symbols, okay, we can say the network of these symbols are used together is called DFD. Okay, data flow diagram, which we'll be seeing in detail. And why we are calling this function model symbols as DFD? Because DFD consists of control model, function model, process model, and organizational model. Okay, so these are various models which all together make our DFD, that is data flow diagram. Okay, so as I said, in the functional model, its advanced form, or we can say that one of its types is functional flow block diagram. So let's see what is functional flow block diagram. It is a multi-tier or time sequenced step-by-step flow diagram of the system. Functional flow means how that system is functioning, how the flow of uh, process, how it is being synced with the time, with the passage of the time, how different functions or process are performed. That is functional flow diagram. Okay, so it is one of the type of functional diagram. So functional flow block diagram. It is one of the type of function modeling. Okay, so it was developed in 1950. Okay, how does it look like? It is also a graphic, a pictorial representation of the various functions in a particular system, but it is in multi-tier. Okay, it is a multi-tier and time sequenced and shows step by step flow, step by step flow diagram of the system. Okay, now this functional flow diagram has many names. It is being addressed as different name, and so it is referred as functional flow diagram. It is known as functional block diagram and functional flow. So in the question, you can be asked this functional flow block diagram by different names. It can be asked as functional flow diagram, it can be asked as functional block diagram, or just functional block or functional flow block diagram. Now, how do we make this functional flow FFBD? How do we make this FFBD? Okay, so in this, we'll always make input. Okay, so for every input, we'll have an output. Okay, so when input is given, it is being processed or some functions are being applied on it. So in diagrams, you may have input and various functions performed on them, and you have generated output, or you have given some input, that input is being processed, okay, some processed, and then you get an output for that. So let's see few example how an input when an input is given in a system, so how various functions are performed using those input, or so an output is generated, or how on that input a process is being applied to get an output. Okay, so let's see an example that, as we have already taken that example during the state diagram also. Okay, if a switch is on, okay, and light glows, so what is the process, what are the various process or functions involved in it? So let's see an example. When the switch is pressed, it's on, and the light glows. Okay, let's see if we have to make a functional flow block diagram. Or okay, for this, I said we'll have an input and we'll have an output. So let us have an input. Okay, that is flip switch, means switch has been on. Okay, switch is on. Now when this input is given, what happens? We'll get an output. And what would be that output? Light glows. Now, what was the mechanism involved in this whole method, in this whole model? Only just you press the switch, it's on, and the light goes. But in between, what all things were going on? Okay, so whenever we press the switch, when we switch on it, so what happens? The electric circuit, okay, the circuit is connected. So we can say that electrical circuit connect, join, okay, something of that sort. Now when the circuit is joined, when the circuit, the switch is on, the circuit gets connected, so immediately what happens when the circuit is connected? Okay, so the current starts flowing, the current flows. Okay, so when the current flows, what happens? It heats up the bulb filament. So it heats the bulb filament. Okay. Now, when the bulb filaments get heated up, when its temperature increases, so the bulb filament glows. Glows. Okay. The bulb filament will glows, and you can further expand, otherwise you can complete it here only. We can say that then the reflector focuses light beam. it depends on you. You want to include this step or not. Reflector focuses light beam. Okay, so this is the mechanism involved in the system when we are trying to switch on a light and it starts glowing, it starts working. Okay, so this is the function model, or you can say that functional flow block diagram of the situation given to us, that whenever a light switches on, so what is the processes involved in it and how the output is generated. Okay, so this is one of the situation. Let's see one or more situations like this. Okay, now there is a condition given to us that we have to draw the functional of the. I'll just take small name that we have to make the functional flow block diagram FFBD for a car. Okay, when the car was started and when it stopped, so what all the process involved in it. So I started the car, I took a drive. Okay, and now the car is stopped. So for this situation we have to draw FFBD. Let's see how we can draw this. Okay, so I'll draw these in steps so that it becomes easier for you to understand. Okay, car, I'll just write that when we started the car. Okay, when the car was started, took a drive, and then stop. Okay, so draw FFBD, functional flow block diagram. So the initial stage. Okay, as see, it is not necessary that you have to draw in steps. Why I'm drawing in steps? So that it becomes easier for you. We can directly draw like this also, and for understanding it in a better way, we can draw in steps also. So in the first step, we can say that start. Okay, we are given the car was started. Okay, and the car stopped. Okay, now why the car was started? To take a drive, drive car. Okay, so this was the main purpose of this project. Start car, I'll write here start car and stop car. Now, what would be the various functions or process involved in it? Okay, so let's talk about the drive. So I can elaborate it more. Start car, okay, drive car, and stop car. Let's see how we can expand it. Okay, now when the car was started, what would have happened at the start? So at the starting, we can see that we would have changed the gear. Okay, first we always, whenever we start the car, we make the gear shift in neutral. So place gear shift, adjust the gear or make it neutral as you want to frame it. Okay, so we have adjusted the gear. Now after adjusting the gear, what would be done? Turn on the ignition or turn the key to on the car. Okay, turn on the ignition. Now after turning on the ignition, what would be done? We would select to drive. Okay, we would select to drive. So these would be the steps when we start the car. We change the gear, we on the turn the key to ignite, make it on, and we are in a mode to drive the car. Now, while driving, what all things would happen? Okay, so I'm not going for the third steps because again I would have to draw all those things. So I'll explain in this one only. So in drive car, how you would drive a car? It would not start running by itself. Okay, so you would have to accelerate it. Accelerate. Okay, so we can say accelerate. Now, when the car is accelerated, you will be going straight, or you may take a turn. Okay, turn or going straight or anyway or taking your car in back direction. Now what all steps you want to include, you can expand it. Okay, now this would be steps included in driving the car. When these all things would be over, now the output, the end would be okay to stop the car and ignition off. So for stopping the car, you can add a step here, stop ignition, turn off ignition. So these are the various functions or process which are involved in